Thanks, Camila. So Camila went to school with my son Jordan. They were in the same class at Waldorf. And you were on this stage many a time when you were a little girl singing songs and being in the Christmas plays. I remember it well. And I think I christened Camila as well. Good morning. So this month, our focus has been on the edge. Next month, it's the leap. Right now, we're just sort of standing on the edge. We haven't exactly had to go over yet, but next month, we're supposed to go over. So as we've been looking at this theme of the edge, we looked at words like edginess and being on the edge and people who are on the edge. And usually it means somebody who's ahead of the curve, someone who's ahead of the game, maybe like a scout who's looking forward and making the world better for the rest of us. We've been exploring our own personal edge, and what we've discovered is that's different for every single one of us. What might be my edge isn't yours, and vice versa. So this afternoon, we're all, 44 of us, are going out to Camino Island on the zip line. How many of you are going? All right, look around the room. We're all going zip lining. And what I've discovered is some people are like, yeah, zip lining, that's not such a big deal. You know, that's not much of an edge. Now, skydiving or, bungee cord jumping, that might be an edge. We had karaoke a week or so ago, and that was an edge for people. So what's important is that we begin to discover that for every single one of us, that edge is different. So we are going to carpool if we like. If you want to carpool, meet in the lobby following the service. We're meeting out there about 2:15, and I just got one ticket that somebody gave me. So if you're interested in going zip-lining this afternoon, if it is an edge experience for you, it'll be right here, so you can come get that. Well, if you know right now, you can come get it. We got somebody over there that wants it. Well, you come get it. All right. Last week we talked about the edge of consciousness based on some of the teachings by Teilhard de Chardin, who talked about the omega point. And the omega point is that birthright that we have, that we are all growing into the Christ consciousness. Charles Fillmore said it, that when our personality is totally taken over by the God self, the Christ self, then we become like Christ Jesus. We become the Christ Scott. We become the Christ Terry. We become the fully incarnated being of the Spirit that we really are, where there's no separation whatsoever. Jesus called it the kingdom of heaven. He said it's expanding. It's growing. It's like leavened bread. It's like the mustard seed that starts out tiny but grows into this big bush. So the edge is always about our consciousness expanding in different ways. Einstein said it this way. He said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So life is a series of challenges and problems, wouldn't you say? I mean, it kind of is. And the truth is, if we keep having the same problems over and over and over again, maybe it's because we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And in order to face a problem and to change it and to move through it, we need to change our consciousness in order for that to happen. Now, here's the thing. No one said that standing on the edge is a comfortable place to be. And when you're standing on the edge, there's always that opportunity to go, well, maybe not. Maybe I'm going to kind of back off of this. One of the visuals is of standing on a diving board, right? You're on the diving board and you're on that edge, and you can go or you can back off and go, nah, I don't think so. The word comfort zone, so we like our comfort zone. The word comfort zone actually originated with temperature. So the idea is that a comfort zone is between 67 and 78 degrees. I don't think that's true for Northwesterners. I think for Northwesterners, comfort zone is probably more like 64 to 71 degrees, right? Do you have your friends ever come visit from out of town and they're like, do you ever turn the heat on around here? They're always freezing. The idea of a comfort zone is that it's not too hot and it's not too cold. And we also have psychological comfort zones. Judith Bardwick said that a comfort zone is a behavioral state within which a person operates in an anxiety-neutral position. An anxiety-neutral position. We'd all like to be there, right? But the truth is that we are actually more productive when our anxiety level goes up a little bit. Now, the thing is that sometimes the older we get, the more we may want to stay in a comfort zone, or the more we define ourselves. It's like, I like this, but I don't like that. I eat these kinds of foods, but I don't eat that. I like this kind of person, but not that kind of person. I like to travel this way, but not that way. And the thing is that when we move into that box, we limit our souls from the infinite possibilities that lie within. We cut our soul off. So when we step outside the comfort zone, we risk what? We risk looking stupid. We risk failure. We risk being foolish. And bottom line is, we put ourselves in a vulnerable position, don't we? We put ourselves in a vulnerable position when we're willing to go beyond our comfort zone. And yet, again, that's how we grow. We need to feel the fear and do it anyway. We need to be scared and do it anyway. So there's a word that's called optimal anxiety. And this actually came from a couple of psychologists back in 1908. They said, Robert Yerkes and John Dodson explained that a state of relative comfort created a steady level of performance. In order to maximize performance, however, we need a state of relative anxiety, a space where our stress levels are slightly higher than normal. And this space is called optimal anxiety, just outside our comfort zone. Now, here's the deal. If we don't have a little bit of optimal anxiety, now I'm not talking about high anxiety here, just optimal anxiety, our tendency is to phone it in, right? Have you ever gotten so comfortable with something like, yeah, I know how to do that, so I'm just going to phone it in. But when you've got a few of those butterflies going, it's like, okay, I'm going to push myself to the edges here, and I'm going to go for it, right? So we want to go a little bit beyond that, where it's just really comfortable. Now, sometimes we need to be pushed. Have you ever been pushed into the edge? Have you ever been pushed where someone else may see something in you that you don't see in yourself? Have you ever seen in another person, wow, this person could be doing this, and then you don't do it? And so we need to be sometimes shoved a little bit. It's like fruit on a vine, right? If the fruit's on the vine, what happens if it stays on the vine and we don't pick it? It rots, or it falls off on the ground and it rots. But when it's picked at the right moment, it's delicious and it's wonderful. And we are the same. So an example, I love this example, is when Jesus had just prepared for his ministry. He had spent 40 days in the wilderness, and he had been facing his inner demons. He had been facing all these things that he needed to let go of before he started his ministry. And he goes to a wedding feast, right? And he's at the wedding feast, and Mary, his mom, is there, and she realizes, uh-oh, they ran out of wine. Well, that's a big sin. You can't run out of wine at a wedding feast. And so Mary says to him, Jesus, they ran out of wine. And he said, woman, what has this to do with me? My hour has not yet come. In other words, Mom, back off. Leave me alone. And of course, she's this wonderful Jewish mother where she sees this incredible potential in her son. My baby can do anything. And he's like, Mom, it's not time yet. I'm not ready. And she's like, and she totally ignores him. And she says to the servants, do what he tells you. Do what he tells you. And so he tells them to bring in the vessels. They're filled with water. He turns them into wine, and he doesn't turn it into just like $2 chalk. He turns it into this fabulous, wonderful wine, so that the guests are saying, wow, most people serve the cheap stuff at the end of the wedding and the good stuff at the beginning, but these people serve the good stuff at the beginning and the great stuff at the end. So it's Jesus' first miracle. And his mom recognized in him that he was ready. And so she pushed him into it. It's the same thing when Moses, he's being visited by God in the burning bush, and God's telling him, you've got to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt into the promised land. And he's like, I don't think you mean me. I think you mean my brother Aaron, I stutter. I'm just a terrible public speaker. You really don't want me. And God's like, nope, it's you. And what does Moses do? He steps into it, but he had to be pushed. He had to be pushed by God to enter into those situations. Have you ever been pushed? Have you ever been pushed by a loved one or pushed by God to say, you can do this. I see it in you. Sometimes when you're outside the comfort zone, people don't really know what to do with you. Yeah? Have you ever been kind of on the edge and they're like, oh, well, you don't really fit anywhere, and I'm not sure where you fit or how you fit. And I watched a documentary recently, and it was about Bing Russell, who's Kurt Russell's dad. It's a story I never heard before. But apparently in Portland, in the late 60s, early 70s, they had a AAA baseball team called the Beavers. Now, the problem is, nobody came to see them because they were so horrible. And so they would go out and play, and there'd be like, 50 people in the stands, and it was, disconcerting. So the AAA team just pulled out of town. They're like, we're not going to be here. Well, Bing Russell, he was a stunt man, and he played in Bonanza. He said he was killed like 123 times in different westerns. And he loved baseball, and he thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone. I've never done anything like this before, but I'm going to start my own baseball team. And so he came to Portland. He started a team called the Portland Mavericks in 1972, or 1973, and basically they were outside the comfort zone of the Major League Baseball institution. They were a renegade team. There were about 200 or 300 people that showed up for tryouts. And these were people who had been rejected by the major leagues, or they'd always wanted to play baseball, and none of them fit the stereotype that you would think of as a ball player, right? Some of them had beer bellies, some of them were older, and they were crazy, and they were amazing, and they were great, and they were so good that they kept winning every year, and their attendance records. So in 1972, for the whole season, there were 91,000 fans. That's 74 games. So you figure out how many people were at each game in this big stadium. When the Mavericks started, they started with 83,000 fans in 73 for just 40 games, not 74. And they had 125,000 fans in their final season. And they went into the pennant. It was an A team, not AAA or AA, but the A team. And they really wanted to win, and guess what happened? Because, the major leagues were kind of ignoring them, but they were making them look stupid because they were so good. And so at the very last couple of games, they brought in their top players from the AAA, and, they ended up losing the pennant, but it's this miraculous, wonderful story about having fun and being outside the norm, being outside the comfort zone of what baseball is supposed to look like. And they created this incredible experience for the city of Portland. And guess what? The major league teams decided they wanted back in because the attendance was up, and they ended up offering Bing Russell $28,000 for the team, and he took them to court, and he ended up getting $208,000 back in the 70s. It's a wonderful story. We have two big edges that we all live with, and that is the edge of birth, right? Coming into this planet, coming into this world. That's what the kids are learning about today, about that choice to be born. And then we have the other end of it, which is the edge of leaving this planet, the edge of death. And any woman who's been pregnant and been through that 9th month, does that not feel like the edge for you? Did it feel like the edge? Like, I know when I was pregnant with my son, he was 10 days late. I felt like I was pregnant forever and was going to be pregnant forever, and that he would never be born. And I remember asking all the women that I knew who had given birth, I said, all right, what did you do to finally bring it on? And then I tallied, and I came up with the top 2 answers. And the top 2 answers were get a massage and take castor oil. So I did both in the same day, went into labor a few hours later, and my son literally was born in an hour and a half. It was like waiting, and then boom, there he is. He just came. So we all have that edge where we come into this planet, we take our first breath, and we enter into this life, and then we face the other edge where it's time for us to leave. So many of you know I was in North Carolina a couple weeks ago, and I was visiting Richard and Maureen. And Richard is at the other edge where he's, on the way of leaving this planet. And we had long talks, and he said, I don't have a bucket list anymore, and I feel like that my work is complete here, and I don't know how long it takes the body to die. Does it take a whole year? Does it take months? It's like birth. You can choose it because of assisted suicide and things like that, but he said, it's like when you're born, you don't choose necessarily the moment that you come in, and death is the same way, isn't it? We don't know. It's just that moment comes. And today, he and Maureen are resigning from their church and letting it go and releasing it so that the next phase of the edge of this end can be something that they want to create that's different from what they're doing. Through all these steps, through all these edges, whether it's the edge of coming into this world and taking our breath, or it's the edge of taking the last breath, the constant that is with us all the time is God. There is no place where we can be where God is not. I love the one scripture that reads, I can go to the depths of Gehenna, the depths of hell, and God is there. I can go to the pinnacles of heaven, and God is there. God knew me when I was being knitted in the womb. God carries and is with me through all the different stages and periods of my life. So no matter what our edge is, the Spirit of God is with us. As we're standing there ready to go over, it's ready to go with us and guide us. So we as a community are stepping outside of our comfort zone, aren't we? We have a 10 o'clock service, so that right there is beyond our comfort zone. We're in new territory with the building change and the building design, with all the changes that are going on in South Lake Union. I was parking the car in the back, and I looked up, and there's this high-rise that wasn't there a few weeks ago. It's not done, but it's like, oh, where'd that come from? And it's like, whoa, it's like, it's the edge. It's everywhere. It's moving us beyond our comfort zone as a community. It's moving me beyond my comfort zone as a minister. And I've been challenged by Jan Campbell to go through another comfort zone to do that ice bucket thing for ALS. So next week I'm going to dump ice water on my head. So come to church, because I told the staff, I said, well, I could do it outside after the service. They're like, no, we could put a tarp down. We'll figure it out. And you may be challenged next to go to your edge. So there's times in life when life may push us beyond our comfort zone. And it's not because life is trying to be difficult. It's because we're ready and we've done our inner work. So we get pushed. To step outside our comfort zone calls for vulnerability, calls for the possibility of failure and for looking stupid. Right? It means feeling the fear and doing it anyway, not going for high anxiety, but then not phoning it in either, going for the optimal anxiety. As Einstein said, no problem can be created from the same consciousness that created it. No problem can be solved from the same consciousness that created it. Life is constantly presenting us with myriad opportunities to grow in consciousness. So may we all not only just stand on the edge, but take the leap. We'll see you next Sunday.